So I'll just reintroduce me. I'm the distributist. I run a YouTube channel that broadly commends traditionalism in the broader sense, Western traditionalism to be specific. And I come from a Catholic background. And so we were discussing perspectives on the cultural war and the future of gender relations with the MGTOW community. And I have here Turd Flinging Monkey from the MGTOW community to really hammer out what we are, what the differences are, and where perhaps controversies could arise. So, did you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Turd Flinging Monkey. I'm a talking chimpanzee who sells sex toys on the side.
Great, and you're also a MGTOW ideas driver, right?
Right, a MGTOW philosophy. But I also want to emphasize that when I talk about, societal things like societal collapse, patriarchy, these aren't MGTOW. MGTOW very simply is just anti-marriage, anti-gynocentrism. It's a very low bar. So obviously people bring their own politics, their own beliefs into MGTOW, and I'm no different. So a lot of things I'm going to talk about don't represent MGTOW as a whole. They just represent my personal flavor. Because that's the thing about MGTOW. It's men going their own way.
No, I understand MGTOW is incredibly diverse feature of I don't think it's as consolidated an idea as traditionalism is.
There's no hierarchy.
The community I'm in represents about like 5 or 6 different Christian religions, just in the various bloggers who make it up. And I think there's more agreement among us than there would be under typical MGTOW. But I think still we can hammer out some of the differences.
Right.
Could you just explain MGTOW for people who might not know, I guess?
Well, it's almost a rejection. It's a rejection of gynocentrism, and traditionalism plays a large part in that. But before we talk about that, we have to define gynocentric traditionalism from patriarchal traditionalism, because I think we may or may not agree more than we think. We may actually be more or less in agreement on a lot of things and only have small quibbles, or we may be completely 180 degrees apart from each other, depending on how you answer one question. So are you ready for this question?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So taking into account the last 100 years, so we've had 3 waves of feminism, all kinds of female liberation, female empowerment. This has all come at the expense of male authority, particularly between a husband and his wife and a father and his children. So
to a certain degree, where do you start this process? The 19th century, the 20th century? The Industrial Revolution, I guess. I mean, you could imagine any number of starting points for feminism, I suppose, right?
Well, feminism, I mean, if you want to talk about the when the seeds were planted, they were really planted like during the Protestant Reformation, because that's when women started to become educated. That's when the first proto-feminist writers began writing little booklets. And then that eventually became, during the 1800s, kind of the proto-feminist movement, which then took off in the early 1900s. But if we just want to start in the last 100 years with the actual official waves of feminism, starting with first wave, women being given the right to vote, but being exempt from the draft. Second wave, all the reproductive rights and all this other stuff. So, and then third wave, patriarchy theory, all that fun stuff. So if we just talk about the last 100 years, you can see that the marriage as a deal, if you think of it as like a business deal, has become less and less favorable to the man. In fact, it is MGTOW's position, by and large, again, I'm not speaking for all MGTOW, but marriage just offers no benefit to a man. The only benefit that I could come up with, and I'm really straining, is if you can't afford something like a surrogate, or perhaps when artificial wombs or cloning comes online, some sort of technological asexual reproduction, marriage is kind of a rent-to-own alternative. If you can't afford these expensive technologies, that is literally the only benefit to a man. If you absolutely want to have children, but you can't afford something like a surrogate mother, or the laws make that illegal, like in the UK.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the trouble is that you're taking these concepts of patriarchal marriage outside of the context of the societies they grew up in. I'm not sure that modern man is more put upon than, say, a man in the 17th or 16th century. He certainly has less authority inside of a marriage, but at the same time, marriage was just one of the institutions that man occupied, and that put claims in on his responsibility.
There's nothing wrong with men being responsible. Now, a lot of MGTOW, they don't want that responsibility. They like some people mistakenly believe that the goal should be to liberate men in the same way women were liberated, so that nobody's responsible. But you can't have a society if nobody's responsible. Obviously, somebody has to be responsible. So then
Yes.
the next fork in the road is, okay, well, then we need to force women to be responsible. We need to pull them up to 50% responsibility and accountability, just like men. But that doesn't work either, because women are
biological
physically,
differences.
mentally, and emotionally incapable of doing what men do.
Well, I think it would be a better way to put it would be they have different biological skills and features, and therefore they'll react differently to different institutional pressures.
Well, you're being very, I guess, you're being very nice the way you put it. See, I'm very blunt because I don't care.
No,
But
I don't care either. I'm just saying I see men and women are fundamentally complementary in some sense. I agree that there is some competition.
They can be. I look at women. Well, before we get to that, the whole crux of this question that I'm kind of leading up to is, given the last 100 years, the way marriage has become less and less of a good deal for men. Is your position that men should continue to get married despite all these changes in the institution because Jesus said so, and because what the white race needs more babies?
Well, I'm not a racialist. I'm more focused on religion, so I'll go with the Jesus one.
Okay, so you believe they should still get married, even if the institution has become completely unfavorable.
Well, the thing is, it's like saying like most people who fall out of planes will die. Will you jump out of the plane with a parachute? The marriage deal is largely what you make of it. You don't have to. Not everyone gets the same deal, and if you go for certain traditionalist women in certain communities, you can create a very workable situation. A lot of times we're reacting to marriage inside of what we traditionalists might term a broken sexual culture. And it's not surprising that people are going to get screwed over in this situation. So there's two things I think we really should consider. The first of all is what you're trying to get. Like, are you trying to optimize your pleasure? Because if you're trying to optimize your pleasure, you wouldn't do any number of things. You wouldn't start small businesses. You wouldn't take any risks. You just like do drugs and play video games, right? If you're trying to actually achieve something, though, go for greatness, that only can be undertaken by taking on risks, like going to war, starting a business, trying to spend extra time trying to invent that thing, even though there's a high probability that you'll fail. All great things have to be accomplished across the probability of failure, however high or low that is. So I don't think it's a pertinent question. The draw to marriage is not caused by some kind of playing it safe, maximize the expected pleasure I'll get out of it. It's an aspirational calling that everyone knows is risky.
Well, let me change the subject slightly, but you'll probably see through my little subtle analogy. So imagine, let's think of business law for a second. So let's say me and you wanted to start a business together.
Yes.
We were going to form a partnership. So we thought about it. This partnership was going to cost $100 million. Now we could all bring, $50 million each, and then have the $100 million, and we'd be 50-50. But you don't have $50 million. You only have 10. So I'm going to bring 90. You're going to bring 10. No big deal. Because we come to an agreement, we decide, okay, so I'm going to bring most of the money, but you're going to do most of the work. You're going to run the business. I'm going to enjoy the profits because I'm putting up the money. But then we kind of talk about it, and we realize that I'm actually more experienced. I would actually run the business better than you because of my background. So we decide, okay, I'm bringing the money, and I'm going to be doing the work, and you're only putting up 10%. But in order to make things fair, because I'm putting up most of the resources and running the business, I'm going to be the majority stockholder. I'm basically, what I say goes. You're going to more or less be my silent partner. You can tell me if you would like things to change, but I'm under no legal obligation to listen to you because I'm the one providing the resources and doing all the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how some, and also if you were the majority shareholder or someone sued the company, you would be the one paying out.
Right. I'm bearing the responsibility. I'm putting in the resources. I'm doing the work.
Target you.
Right.
Okay, I mean
So
that's broadly the
hold on.
justification for patriarchy. Yes.
Slow your roll. Slow your roll. All right. So we're going to form this business together,
Hmm.
but we happen to live in a country where the law says each partner gets half.
Hmm.
So I'm putting in all the work. I'm putting in 90% of the
Upon
resources.
dissolution of the
Yeah,
relationship.
but then you can basically just come in tomorrow, say I want to dissolve the partnership, and then you get half the company. Plus, not only do you get half the company, I have to pay your salary for life.
Uh-huh.
Now, if
There
that were
used
the
to be,
law,
yes.
if that were the law, and I said, you know what, I don't feel comfortable going forward with this partnership because not that I don't like you, you seem like a cool guy, but the laws are so heavily tilted against me that I just don't feel comfortable moving forward with this partnership. In your response was something like, "Oh, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You guys got to find the right partner." It just doesn't make any sense. It's not you.
Well,
You
the
wouldn't
thing
be the
is that I
problem.
mean, even
The
if
law would be the problem.
I might agree with you that I mean, there's two things. The traditionalist response to this is, well, divorce laws might in fact disadvantage men. I'm not so sure that there isn't. The first of all thing is, I would have no problem with reforming divorce laws. I'd have to
Right.
look at the bill. But as a traditionalist, I highly suspect that there is no legal regime of divorce that won't in some ways screw over one of the two genders.
Right.
Women
No,
have
you have to.
all their market value come in early. So if you go into a relationship with a woman in her 20s, you keep her married for 10 years and you divorce her, and there's no financial punishment for that. Women will marry women when they're young, use up all of their implicit market value, and then divorce them, which people
Right.
did do. So
Right.
I don't think that there is a regime of no fault divorce that won't screw over either men or women. Now, you may be right that our current divorce laws screw over men. I don't know. I'd have to look at the statistics. But I don't
Okay.
think that any divorce laws whatsoever wouldn't screw over somebody. If we equally divided up the resources,
Well, no,
there would be an implicit screwing
I've
over of women because there'd be an incentive to essentially use up their fertile years and leave them high and dry when they entered their period of vulnerability.
well, I can solve that easily. So you solve that by using private contracts rather than a one size fits all marriage institution. So if I want to form a partnership with a woman, I'm basically saying I will take care of you for life and you're going to bear me children. That's a pretty sweet deal. However, based on the quality of the woman, based on what I bring to the table, we're going to haggle things out. She's going to want protections. She's like, how do I know you're not going to leave me when I'm 35 for a younger woman? Well, we could,
How does she know?
because we're going to put that just like a partnership. You heard of buy-sell agreements when you form a partnership. So if one partner wants out, the other partners have to buy out his stake, or take out life insurance on the other partners, so that if something happens to them, you basically can buy out their stake. You bake these things into the contract before the partnership is formed. You already work out how a quote unquote divorce would work. And if both partners don't agree that this is in their mutual benefit, the partnership never goes forward. So no partner's getting screwed. You work out, everybody brings what they have to the table, and then they negotiate what the value is between the two partners.
But people have no way of knowing how the values will. What if your wife turns out to be infertile? What if your husband gets sick? What if when we were talking about contracts that go over for 30 years, this doesn't. I mean, this doesn't translate into the idea that two people essentially get each other's backs for the rest of their lives is not something that can be put into a contract. It's going to have to take something like commitment to a country or commitment to a military regime. Like, for instance, do you think the military should be run on contracts, like the individual soldiers sign contracts with the military or something like that?
They do. They take an oath really. And they sign a contract.
I mean, so can they tear it up and not be accused of desertion?
I mean, and now they can. I mean, look at Bradley Manning. He's the government doesn't charge people with treason anymore. If that's a complete.
But the thing is, if we were fighting an actual war and soldiers felt like they had they negotiated contracts with the military, and we were taking Bunker Hill and storming D-Day, the military would just totally not function. It would dissolve in a second.
Well, it's like when you have female soldiers get pregnant.
F that, I'm not going to be the one charging German machine guns.
Right. That's why women get
pregnant
to do this, deployments. Right? Well, no, you're
Nobody is going to sign a contract that will involve self-sacrifice.
no,
This
they
is a
do.
fundamental thing that our modern society has to
Okay,
realize.
when I joined I served 8 years in the military.
Yes.
Sign a contract, and you actually give up your rights when you join the military. You lose your right to freedom of speech. You can't
Mhm.
just go in your uniform and talk to the press. You will get court-martialed.
Yes.
You can also be subject to things that aren't illegal for a civilian to do, but are illegal for you to do as a member of the military. There's all kinds of things. Like the government writes little loopholes into these contracts that you sign when you join the military that allows them to circumvent a lot of your basic rights as an American citizen.
I'm
But
not
you,
saying that there isn't a contract involved. What I'm saying is that it can't be strictly contractual. It can't be seen as strictly contractual. Uh,
but that's what marriage
Soldiers are
is.
well, no,
Marriage
but
is a contract. Like
in
animals don't have
military
marriage.
times, like people gave up their lives, right? Like they didn't do that
Right.
because like they signed a contract. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I signed clause 25B that says that I have to charge these machine guns. They did that because they loved their country and they felt a primary loyalty to their country.
Or they were drafted and threatened with they were going to be executed for desertion or cowardice or something like that.
I
So they
suppose,
figured,
but that's not how soldiers in the past who have fought in frontline combat have seen their duty.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it
at least if we
depends.
believe their writings.
Maybe I don't know. Like when I served, everyone I served with, especially when you're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, they
Mhm.
never. I mean, on their worst day, they had no. They could not threaten the United States. Like, yeah, they flew a couple planes in the World Trade Center. They crashed some trucks into some Christmas shopping centers, but there's no way they're going to overthrow the United States militarily. So we're over there just killing them by the thousands. There's
And I'm talking about generally how you organize
Well,
a
your
group of people
homeland
to
has to be
self-sacrifice.
threatened. Your homeland has to be threatened. You can fight to defend your homeland. You don't need a contract for that. But I'm talking like the
I'm saying
military itself
you
is a
need something of a
contract.
primary loyalty to get soldiers to like charge D-Day, like
Yeah,
Normandy Beach.
you have self interest. You don't need
The soldiers
necessarily.
who charged Normandy Beach were not doing it for self-interest reasons.
Well, because they believed in democracy and Western
Sure.
values
Well,
and all
sure,
that
sure,
stuff.
but that's how you create relationships and organizations that actually involve self-sacrifice. And I hate to say it, the family is much more like an organization that involves self-sacrifice and much less like some kind of lawyer contract where you have to like you give out a certain number of years and then you
Well,
get
the purpose of the contract isn't to okay. Animals form families without any sort of government, any sort of contracts. They meet someone, the chemicals fire off in their brains, they make babies, and they take care of the babies, and the animals do their animal thing. But the contract is important to protect, like you were talking about earlier. The woman has no protection if the man wants to leave her after she's hit the wall for a younger woman. She needs that protection. No, she's giving up her fertile years to this man. She needs some sort of protection to know that the man isn't going to abandon her. Now, the man wants some protections as well. He wants to know the children are his. He wants to know that his children aren't going to get taken away. Like there's certain protections both parties desire, and that's where the contract comes in. The contract doesn't supersede love and all the normal things that form families, because families are going to be formed. I mean, look at all the single moms. You obviously can have families without marriage. That the problem is you don't have good families without these sort of commitments. In order to protect the interests of both parties, you should have private contracts. The problem with modern marriage is it's been altered over the last several decades to favor the woman overtly at the expense of the man in the name of protecting the woman. So
No, but this is the problem. Marriage has whether you call marriage a vow or a contract or whatever. The fundamental thing about marriage is that it can't be a negotiation between two people to get things out of the other person. It has to be a contract of self-sacrifice by both people to the greater institution of the family. They have to acknowledge, both of them, that when they're going into it, they're sacrificing themselves for the family. That is what marriage has to be in order to do what it needs to do.
Okay, well, I disagree, because why does it have to? Why can't it just be, you know what? I want children. You want to be financially provided for. Let's make a deal.
I
And
mean, is that working? I mean, this is the perspective that we've had for the last 30 or 40
well, it
years.
would
I
work
mean,
if
it just, you're saying that if we got better negotiators for the male side, that we'd make it more fair. But I think it's just the entire idea that it's like two litigant parties trying to like get more stuff out of each other is what essentially has led to essential destruction of marriage. In my
no,
opinion.
you're using like trying to get stuff out of each other. Marriage is based on mistrust. The woman requires marriage. The reason why a woman wants a man to put a ring on it before she spreads her legs is because she doesn't trust him to stick around once she gets pregnant, once the gray hairs and crow's feet set in. She does not trust him to stick around. That's why women traditionally, they're the ones who impress upon the man to propose and get married, because the woman wants that protection. So the woman is trying to get something out of the man in the form of marriage. It doesn't mean she's not sacrificing. It doesn't mean the man's not sacrificing. When you take a job, you're sacrificing your time, but you're getting paid. There's mutual benefit. So it's not about replacing love or sacrifice or all these larger ideals that go into a relationship or a family. It's about shoring up the support so that the actual protections protect both parties equally, as opposed to only protecting the woman at the overt expense of the man.
I think it's the perspective that I think is really lacking, though. I think that, I guess perhaps I'm not communicating this, but most people who signed up for war in World War I and World War II did not think that they're going to get more money out of the experience than they put in time. And that's the kind of attitude that people need to take towards developing a family. If you think that the family is something higher that you would be able to sacrifice pleasure and money for, then go ahead. Now, I agree that maybe we need to tweak the incentive structure in order to get more men to marry. But if it's just going to be tweaking the incentive structure inside the greater cultural view that we have right now, that this is fundamentally some kind of contract to get pleasure, it's going to be meaningless.
It's not about pleasure. And to your point about sacrifice and people going to war, people went to war. And I'm not just talking about World War II. I'm talking about any big war, especially one that necessitated a draft. They went there to defend their families and their home and their freedom. These are things they will sacrifice their lives for. They will die to defend.
They'll die to defend their families and their homes, right? So we acknowledge that men can sacrifice for their families, and that is what you're doing when you're aspiring to marriage. You're sacrificing for a family.
But you don't need marriage to have a family. So marriage doesn't accomplish what you think it does. Marriage is a contract. You can form a family with a man and a woman can come together. Just like two monkeys can come together and make babies and form a family, the male will go out and defend his little baby monkeys from the other monkeys or the other predators, and he will sacrifice his life to defend his family. No marriage, no government, nothing required. That is just instincts. That is the protective male instinct.
And yet in Western humanity, in contemporary Western society, we apparently don't form families without marriage.
No, we do. The problem is the men get pushed out.
Statistically.
So, you're talking about like single mothers and stuff like that?
Statistically, when the family falls apart, women become single mothers. They don't like form up families in everything but the name marriage. I know that's what the Swedes were planning to do for a while, but it looks like even that's falling apart just at a more slow pace.
Now, this has everything to do with a complete lack of incentives for the man. In the last 100 years, whatever, all these single mothers, look at the single motherhood rates. They are consistently going up, and they're tied to the amount of welfare. The more money you pay people, all these, like, we're just going to throw money at you. In fact, in the 60s, and this especially hurt the black community, is they basically paid mothers to kick the father out of the house. Because if you had the father, if you weren't married, like if it was just a man and a woman with some kids together living in a house, the woman would get more money from the government if the father was not living in the house than if the father was living in the house. And this continues to this day.
Oh, I agree. I agree. That's a problem.
If the family is poor, they will get less money from the government. If the husband and wife and the kids are just poor because the husband lost his job, the mom's a stay-at-home mom, they just don't have any money, they'll get less money than if the wife leaves the husband. They'll actually get more money from the government as a single parent than as a married poor family. So the government incentivizes the destruction of the family through welfare. But
I
also,
might agree with you in a certain regards. Again, it's
okay,
policy details, but can I ask you a question? The question I'm
okay.
interested in is from your perspective, is MGTOW just an attempt to reform this traditionalist institution so that we can
It
better
can't.
implement it in the future?
It can't be reformed. Unfortunately, and I've thought about, I've wargamed it. I've tried to think about possible solutions, and I've come up with some solutions. Some of them are quite controversial, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, you can't reform these laws because women vote. You're never going to get women to vote back their rights. The problem with marriage is women are too protected. They have too many rights at men's expense. The only way to bring back these family values, whatever you want to call them, is you have to take women's rights away. You have to scale them back. Women aren't going to go along with that. And because they're not only do they vote, they're the majority of voters.
Yeah,
They're
I agree. They're the
51% of the
majority of voters.
population, and they're like about 53% of US voters. You
No,
can't
the
reform a
question was
democratic society.
not whether you can reform it or not. My
Oh,
question is,
what's
is
MGTOW's
that what you
role in
want? I
this?
mean, well, first of all, we could argue whether I guess I think where you're going is interesting, but I want to establish something before
Okay,
we go
let's
there.
establish
But
something.
regardless of whether you want, we can reform this institution in the
Okay,
government that we're in now. That's what you want to do, right? So we're all trying to get to this traditionalist family structure. You're just saying that the way we're going about it is not
no,
possible.
your heart's in the right place. Now, if you were what I call a gynocentric traditionalist, if you're of the mindset that regardless of how bad the laws are, men just need to keep getting married, keep having babies, just suck it up, walk proudly in that slaughterhouse. Yeah, you'll probably get divorced, and if your kid's taken away and live out of your car and kill yourself, but that's what we got to do as men. If that's your position, you can go F yourself. But if your position is we need to go back to a time where men were in charge of their families and men controlled, they had a very reasonable expectation of keeping their children, and things were balanced between the man and the woman. Obviously, the woman needs the protection. She needs assurances that the man isn't going to leave her. And society's done a terrific job of protecting the woman from men leaving them in the form of child support, alimony, and other negative kind of consequences for that behavior. But it's done nothing because it's liberated women. In the name of female liberation,
Sure.
female empowerment, it's taken all the shackles off of women, all the responsibility off of women. They can do whatever they want, no consequences. All the responsibilities put on the man.
But
And
some men in society right now are able to make it. I could agree with you that our current marriage culture is totally poisonous,
right
but we
now,
can
but would
see
you go a step further and say men should avoid marriage currently because the current
I'd
marriage
say
culture is so poisonous?
I don't know what the point would be to avoid marriage. I can't
To
see there isn't an
preserve your freedom?
alternative. There is not an alternative that I would accept as preferable. And that's because what are you offering me? I mean, more pleasure. I don't consider a pleasure to be the goal in life, right? I can be really, really unhappy that I have to charge a machine gun nest, and I wish the Germans didn't have machine guns. But I
Okay.
much rather, to go for the goal than and brave whatever
Okay.
comes, rather than submit to a life of essentially giving up.
Or let me play a little funny, like a movie scenario. So let's imagine you from the future comes back in time.
Yes.
So, and it's like, Dave, I'm future Dave. And I come with a message, buy Apple stock in the 90s. But
Yes.
also, if you get married, your wife's going to take your kids and divorce you, and you're going to be living out of your car and contemplating suicide. Your world's going to be destroyed. But your kids are going to grow up, and although they'll hate you because your ex-wife turned them against you, they'll be decent, functional, productive citizens, and they'll have families of their own. So go for it. Now, would you just?
You're asking me if I would.
Well, would
You're
you?
asking me if I would if I knew ahead of time that
Yeah, if you knew
marriage
it
would
was going to blow up in your
destroy
face,
me.
if you knew it was going to blow up in your face, would you still sacrifice yourself just
You're acting like
to
all
reproduce?
marriages are like worst case scenario. I guess. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought of that. I mean, if for instance you were to use the war analogy, if you were a Marine going into D-Day and the future self said, Private Ryan, if you go fight in D-Day, you're going to get like shot as soon as the doors open on the amphibious vehicles. maybe Private Ryan wouldn't decide to fight in D-Day, but if every single person decided to do that, then the war would be lost. I don't think the information is very useful at that regard. All it says is that you're doomed.
No, you're not doomed because you have a choice. Now, if you like,
I don't consider. I mean, I might consider joining the priesthood or something. I guess if I knew that
you wouldn't just come out of the closet. I'm gay. Send me home.
What?
You wouldn't just come, because this is back in World War II. Don't ask, don't tell.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't be like, I'm gay. Send me home.
Well, I mean, the thing is, just like I believe in self-sacrifice when it comes to your families. So it's a possibility that you'd have to sacrifice something like that. Even when you get into. Okay. Well, so like for instance, let's say that future me came back and said, you're going to have a family and children, but then your child is going to fall into the ocean and you're going to drown trying to save them. Would you and you're going to drown when you're 27 and your whole life will be cut off. Would you still have a family? I don't know. I think it would be noble to do so, even though it would be an act of self-sacrifice, knowing that knowledge.
Well, to sacrifice yourself nobly is probably pretty masculine, I would say. But to just basically to give yourself up to slavery, to say, oh, I'm going to do this terrible deal. And if you knew for a fact your wife was going to take you to the cleaners, take your money, put you on alimony, your kids are going to get turned against you. You were going to go to jail for back child support that you couldn't afford because, she took you to court, you lost your job, couldn't afford your child support or alimony, went to jail, got raped in the shower room. Like, your life is just a series of unfortunate events.
You're saying like this is the thing though. Like,
well, that's not a sacrifice. That's you giving up your freedom and just confining yourself to a life of misery. I would much rather die drowning in an ocean saving my child, or take a bullet from a German machine gun nest, than go to divorce court, live out of my car, get raped in a shower room, and then hang myself like Robin Williams.
I think that, though, this is the thing. First of all, I know people who've been divorced and who later converted to religions. There's ways of dealing with this that aren't as cocked, to use the alt-right term, as you're putting across. Okay. Furthermore, the thing is, it's just you're portraying the worst case scenario as if we can know it for a certainty. Like charging Normandy Beach is not the same thing as turning yourselves over to the Germans so that you can be sent to Auschwitz. Well, right. You're attempting something noble in the effort, and the worst case situation could befall you, but it's still something that you're trying to obtain. And I still don't know what the alternative is. Is the alternative just to sit on your hands and wait for society to change?
Well, it's pretty much a form of nonviolent resistance. The laws are unreformable.
Yes.
So imagine you're living in a society where you just are not going to get any sort of legal reforms. So the only thing you can do is just take your ball and go home.
But hold on, this is my big problem now. Okay, has that ever worked with societies of men? I know women can collectively go home with their ball or ovaries, and right. And that works. That never works for men. It has never worked. You know what happens? Well, what happens when men take their ball and go home is that right. Other more patriarchal men from a neighboring society come in and take.
They sure do. That right.
What the heck? This isn't even an option. What you're recommending? No, it's not going to work.
There are two options. No, feminism and feminine liberation. This is a self-correcting problem because it ends in one of two ways. You can't run a society that's built and maintained by men while cutting the legs out from under men, while disincentivizing families, while having fertility rates lower than replacement levels, while having entitlement programs going to women that are bankrupting the country. This cannot last.
I know, but you think it's going to be solved by men taking their ball and going home?
It's going to solve one of two ways. Now, one way is vastly more not realistic than the other. So the one you're describing is the natural way. The natural way is when a society becomes too gynocentric, it collapses. and it is
Yes.
replaced by a more patriarchal society. This could
Yes.
be Middle Eastern, Muslim, could be African, who knows? It's
Yes.
going to be a patriarchal society. It's going to kill all the men. It's going to take the women as war brides and rape slaves, and that will be the end of that society. And then the cycle repeats itself.
That's typically what's happened.
That is the historical cycle. Now, the alternative,
of course, yes.
the alternative is men pull their head out of their ass. They actually just say, you know what? We're just going to take. Like, it's not like we have to go kill a bunch of people and take the power. Men have the power. We just need to start using it, and not in the name of women, but actually have a society that's equitable to men. So if men just woke up tomorrow and decided we're going to take your rights away, and women are like, well, you can't do that. Oh, want to bet? And then we do it. That would be the end of the problem. And then no one would have to die. The women wouldn't have to be taken as war brides and rape slaves. But I don't see that happening because we have a democratic society. Women are the majority, and men are by and large cucks. And the more single mothers we have raising men, the more cucks. And it's
you're acting like that. You're acting like society is some kind of uniform culture. That it's all uniformly Portlandia, and there aren't pockets of tradition. And
no, there are. There absolutely are. You got the Amish.
So what's going to happen?
You got Dearborn, Michigan.
Mormons, look, there's tons of traditionalist communities in this country, and as soon as the collapse comes up, those communities are going to start becoming the seed of the new Western society.
Right, and I'm fine with that. See, what MGTOW is.
So why not be a seed?
Okay, well, see, here's the thing. When it comes, I'm open-minded to religion. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not particularly religious.
That's fine.
I will gladly. Now, most people aren't religious. Most people just kind of go along with whatever the predominant culture is. They live in a Muslim country. They'll pray to Mecca 5 times a day, even if they don't actually believe it. If they live in a predominantly Christian culture, they'll, say Merry Christmas and go to church once a week, even if they don't particularly believe it. So right now we're kind of in a post-Christian society. So I'm open-minded to religion. My standard is, back in the days of Moses and Jesus, they did miracles, which taught the people, hey, this guy's legit. Like Moses.
Or actually, Muhammad didn't do any miracles.
No, Muhammad didn't do anything. But Moses and Jesus performed miracles. They showed that they were true messengers from God. So
some prophets did and some didn't.
I want to see a guy floating in the air, teleporting around, raising people from the dead. When that happens, I'll be okay, that guy's legit. But just showing me a book that's a few thousand years old and saying you just got to believe, that's like, no, that's Parappa the Rapper. So I don't listen to Parappa the Rapper.
I got that reference. That was a good game back in the day.
It was.
Now, first of all, I don't feel like I've ever seen a miracle, frankly. And I will point out that the big contending patriarchal force in the world right now, Islam, was essentially developed and perpetuated around the globe without any reference to any miraculous behavior anywhere.
Well, it was just spread
in the life of Muhammad, or even in the life of his successors. It's only Christianity that's really said, this central miracle is the seed of our church. So I would argue that I will defend Christianity against Islam, don't get me wrong, but just as a general rule, I will say that the performance of miracles is not necessary to making the case for traditionalism and for the continuity of a faith.
You can have traditionalism without religion. You can have a secular traditionalism.
You can have religion without miracles, apparently.
Well, you could, but the thing is you can't prove God without miracles, because there's no, like, when someone say prove God exists,
not so sure miracles would even prove the existence of God. I think you had to believe in God in order to even associate a miracle with
it would have to be something. It wouldn't just have to be someone like, how like a lot of people like believe in good luck, like stuff that's really vague, or astrology, where they read something in a horoscope and it's so vague that anything could fit it. Or like these psychics that say, do you or someone have a femme member whose name starts with S? And like, I do. Like, my gosh.
Jonathan Edwards or whatever.
So it's a bunch of bull crap. So it would have to be something that's so miraculous that it can't be explained in any other way other than that is like an avatar of God or a prophet from God. Like, he has to be like in the Bible where there's like thunder and people hear voices, and there's like bread and fish coming from the sky, and there's people walking on water and calling fire from heaven, and mountains being turned into dust, like crazy stuff. that has no logical explanation other than that dude just said mountain be gone, and that mountain just turned into a puff of smoke, and it just
I don't think that there's lots of religions that have developed that do not have miracles associated with them. So
then how do you prove it?
Well, it's because people believe in the principles they're espoused and think that they're divine.
Or it's like, oh, you'll die and become a butterfly. It's like, okay.
Most Christians didn't have never witnessed miracles.
But they're ones who, like, they took the word of someone who supposedly did, like the apostles and the disciples who saw Jesus and saw his miracles, just like the disciples of Moses who traveled with him. In the case of
Muhammad didn't even claim any miracles.
No, well, he just killed people if they didn't convert. That was how that worked.
Sort of. I mean, he had a lot of converts that he didn't have to threaten. So I don't know. I don't think that seeing miracles is really the necessary. No. And first of all, this is only tangentially related to religion, because, as we stated, traditionalism is not religion.
But you asked me why don't I become a seed? Why don't I join one of these traditionalist religious communities? And it's because I'm not religious. And I'm not religious because I don't see any proof of God. And I don't see any proof of God because there's no miracles.
Or even a seqular seed community. There's tons of these, traditional.
Right, but the thing is the only communities that actually a woman. And I've said this before in many of my videos. Women aren't the problem. The gynocentric society is the problem. When women are controlled, they're fine. They're like children or pets. If you train your child or your pet, bring them up correctly, they're delightful. Everybody compliments you. They're wonderful to be around. But when you don't train them or bring them up correctly, they're horrible. You have spoiled brats. You have dogs that pee and chew up everything. So you have to have them under control. And women are no different. Now, you can have this without religion.
But again, I think our language on we agree on the problems. We probably describe it a little bit differently. Right. But I still don't understand why a man would see a society like it is in our stage and say, you know what, I want to be part of that new society that will come about after this one collapses. Mm-hmm. Or if there is going to be a renaissance in the society and the society will reform itself without collapsing, I want to be part of those family units that will force the reform to come about when society is threatened.
Well, the thing is the only communities where a man has a reasonable expectation of not being screwed over by the system is in traditional religious communities. So if he's not traditional, or he may be patriarchal traditional as opposed to gynocentric traditional, but he's not particularly religious, so it would be kind of like a hollow thing. Like it would be like trying to join the Amish and be like, I'm not religious or anything, I think you're full of crap, but you have like a divorce rate of less than 1%. Mm-hmm. So I'm down with that. So can I farm with you guys? I'll build some sheds. They're going to be like, no, get out of here. You have to believe.
Kingpin style.
Yeah, you have to believe. You have to be part of our religious community that comes with it. So
not that I support the alt-right. I have had many fights with them over certain aspects of racialism. But wouldn't they be an example of a traditionalist community that is secular?
I guess in some ways, but the thing is they don't necessarily want to control women. They basically blame minorities for the behavior of their own women. Like when you talk to racists, and racists of all colors, not just the white racists, but the black racists, all these race puritists, I don't even know that's a word, but these racists who say like, oh, you're taking our women, oh, you damn people of different colors.
It depends on which ones you're talking about. The more intelligent alt-righters absolutely blame the progressive movement.
Well, they blame the Jews, they blame the Marxists. They don't blame gynocentrism. They don't blame female nature. Like they're trying to find a boogeyman, and like that's why they always turn to the Jews or they turn to the Marxists, because they don't want to blame their own women. And the black. But you just said that.
Didn't you say this 5 minutes ago that women aren't to blame? Our culture is for creating these perverse institutions.
Well, no. Well,
I think that's the thing, right? It's not anybody's fault. It's the culture's problems.
Well, nature is unequal. Nature made men and women vastly different. So female nature is a thing. Women have hypergamy, men have dominance. We have these different reproductive instincts that can be complementary, but they have to be structured in such a way. Now, for whatever reason, starting with about the French Revolution and then going on with Marxism, we decided that equality was a moral imperative and that we need to treat everyone equally, regardless of how fundamentally different we are. And that's when everything went pear-shaped. So the problem isn't women's nature, because if you understand female nature, it's not that hard to control. It's not that hard to have a mutually beneficial relationship with a woman. If you can appreciate that she can never truly be your partner, she can be your helper, but she's never going to be your equal. And that's okay, because you can both mutually benefit each other.
What you mean by equal?
Well, like, she's
equal
not
and opposite.
Well, I think that's kind of like a fairy tale that a lot of people tell themselves, like, yeah, women don't do anything, but they have babies and that's really important, so we're just going to say they're equal without any supporting evidence. Whatever.
I don't believe in equality. I think equality is just a stupid idea.
Right. So me and you
complaining about someone like, oh, they're not equal. I mean, first of all, how would you measure it? Second of all, why would you even want it?
Well, but here's the problem. So there's different forks in the road that people, when they see the problem, can come up with the wrong diagnosis. So one of the problems with the alt-right is they blame cultural Marxism for the problems with women rather than fundamental differences in male and female nature. Now, if you understand the differences between male and female nature, you'll see that Marx didn't really invent anything. He just gave women permission to act on their baser instincts, and he took away the controls that men traditionally had. But it's not, Marx didn't create anything that wasn't already there. So blaming Jews and blaming cultural Marxism is just like black people, like these Black Lives Matter people, blaming white people for all their problems. It's just
I think that you're right in some sense. Cultural Marxism, first of all, blaming Jews is the stupidest thing ever, in my opinion. Well, but I hate people who do that, but or it's really irritating when people do that. But cultural Marxism, I guess you could say that cultural Marxism is a product of modernity. So the problem goes back a little bit sooner. But in many cases, the things you're complaining about how men are portrayed and how they're treated in certain circles is the result of cultural Marxism. So I am not so sure how.
But the thing is, but it's just like these. Like, a lot of women have denounced feminism. They've declared that they're anti-feminist.
Yes.
But when you really scratch the surface, they're only denouncing third wave feminism. They're supportive of first and second wave. They're more or less egalitarian. They're not actually pro-traditional gender roles. They're not pro-man. They're just pro-equality. But me and you both agree that equality is BS. So they're still part of the problem. They're just a less advanced part of the problem.
But hypothetically, if there was a secular traditionalism that did not have these quirks of the alt-right that you don't like, it would be sort of a noble and
right. Well, if the alt-right, and the same thing with like the black community, if they would drop the white supremacy thing, just like the alt-right needs to drop the whole Jew cultural Marxism thing, if we'll just get together, like, what worked? Men being in charge. That really worked. That had a very long track record of uninterrupted success. And then in the last 100 years, we done goofed. So how about we call a mulligan, we take away all these rights, and then we start over, and that way we can rebuild our communities. And we don't necessarily need to believe in like a wish-granting sky god. We just need to we need to agree that these things worked.
But here's the thing. The thing is, you're never going to get people saying men should be in power because they're men. No one will agree with that.
Men should be in power because they're responsible. You have to have responsibility and authority hand in hand.
Men will only gain authority through an appeal to a higher principle or higher cause. And that's why communities are never organized around empowering men. They're only ever organized around obtaining some transcendental cause that is above men and above women and for the greater good.
Okay, well, so my appeal to that, and I've talked about this, maybe not an entire video dedicated to this, but the relationship between authority and responsibility. So you can't have a party that is responsible but doesn't have authority over what they're responsible for. That creates an unhealthy dynamic. Because men and women just don't have the same responsibilities. Men basically have more or less all the responsibility. Even in the things women had traditionally been responsible for, they've been liberated from those responsibilities, and the responsibility has been placed on men. Just the perfect example is a woman can unilaterally decide she doesn't want to be a parent, have an abortion, or give up the baby for adoption, or drop the baby off at a firehouse without the father's consent. But a man who wants to have a baby, he has no say in whether that child is born. But if the woman wants to keep the baby and the man doesn't want the baby, he is just stuck paying for it. He doesn't get to opt out of parenthood the way the woman does.
I agree that there's asymmetries in our current system.
Right. Well, that's just one example. So men have the responsibility. Women do not have the responsibility. If you agree that authority and responsibility must go hand in hand, then men have to be in charge simply as a matter of justice. Now, just to use another example, the sentencing gap. So they've done studies where they found that women, when sentenced for the same crime as a man, get a 60% lighter sentence. It's very akin to juvie, where like a child would get a lesser sentence for committing a crime as a juvenile. So women have the same responsibility as a child in the legal sense, in a very real sense. If you actually think about it objectively, the way women are treated by our society is very childlike. So they should have the rights of a child. Men should be in charge because they are literally only adults in society.
But here's the thing: we're even if you were to, even if this were true, I'm not going to argue this. You're not in a position to take power right now, and secondly, no, men are never going to be empowered as a group. Specific men are going to be empowered to achieve some specific transcendental end. That's how it always has historically worked. So if you're going to say we need to be empowered to do X, you better have a transcendental end to fight for in order to bring about that new social order.
Well, yeah, men have a colossal problem working together because of our dominance instinct. We see other men as competition, whereas women don't seem to have that much of a problem working with other women.
I should say unifying for their own interests, I should say.
Right. We need...
Okay, I'm going to tweet the link out or to put it in the things that people can continue that thought, okay? Just FYI, people...
Yeah, because I got to leave in a few minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so, I mean, I guess kind of to summarize everything, the most rational action for someone who understands how gynocentric society has become is to withhold starting a family or anything like that because the situation is just not favorable. Now, you can say that it's a noble sacrifice for a man to make this terrible deal, even if it's unfavorable, because he cares about Western civilization and having children, and this is a noble thing for a man to do. I agree that it may be very noble, but it's also very irrational and stupid.
So my critique of this, I call this the MGTOW pyramid scheme. You know that if all men do this, that eventually society will collapse, and the pleasure you get out of doing this will be diminishing each time. So initially, when we're a functioning society, just going like, okay, we're not doing this, has a lot of benefit to you personally.
Well, you assume I don't. You assume I don't want to. Right. You assume I don't want society to collapse. That's the only way things get cleansed. I got my bondage leather and my hockey mask ready to go. I'm ready for Mad Max.
Now, what you want to do is you want to form societies that when there is a collapse will be able to spring up as green shoots.
What I want, my impossible dream, as it were, is I compare myself, and this may be obviously for a YouTube channel with a filthy mouth talking monkey, but
it's very entertaining.
But you think of the founding fathers like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. They were very influenced by writers such as Adam Smith, John Locke. Now, those men didn't fight in the war. They didn't serve as the founding fathers themselves. They had no hand in crafting the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. They just put out ideas that influenced those men. So my goal, the whole purpose of my channel, is I'm putting out these ideas. I don't have all the answers. I fully believe that the only way things get better is if things get a lot worse and society does collapse and a lot of people die. And that's not something I revel in. I don't want that to happen, but I don't see men doing what is necessary to prevent that from happening. So my goal is to put my ideas, hopefully, in the ears of the men who will someday, and I'm not going to be there, and obviously my children aren't going to be there. So my ideas will be there, hopefully, in the ears of those men, so that when they reform society, those ideas will help shape and help that society not make the same mistake that this society made.
But you think that walking away is going to be a value that a new traditionalist society will embrace?
No, MGTOW's a temporary phenomenon. It's a temporary phenomenon.
Yeah, because when traditionalism comes back, they're going to crack down on MGTOW hard and fast.
No, when traditionalism comes, when patriarchal traditionalism comes back,
sure.
When marriage actually offers equitable benefits to men, when men are restored to authority, there won't really be a reason to be MGTOW. I mean, there'll still be bachelors. There'll still be men who like, you know what, I'd rather just not be married, whatever. Who cares? But there won't be a reason to have a fleshed out community of men who are unified and use an acronym or anything like that. There won't be a reason for that. The whole purpose of MGTOW is to counter the overt, out-of-control gynocentrism of society. And when that gynocentrism ends, whether it's through collapse and replacement by a patriarchal system, or whether the Western man just pulls his head out of his ass, then there won't be a reason to be a MGTOW anymore. MGTOW will effectively have served its purpose.
Oh, but there could be those communities coming up at any time now, right?
Well, I mean,
they'll be on small scale before they'll be on large scale.
Well, you're going to see kind of like the civil rights movement, like the NAACP. Yeah, these groups that accomplished their goal, like they overturned Jim Crow, and then a lot of people got off, like, hey, we did it, we won, and then they left, and they went back to their normal lives, and then those groups became more and more, I guess. What's the word I'm looking for? They started forming like kind of niche causes because their overall goals were already accomplished. Now, so I'm not saying they're all MGTOW will abandon MGTOW if gynocentrism is ever overthrown. I'm saying that most people will be like, oh, we won. Okay, cool. And they'll play that sweet victory song, and then they'll just go off into the sunset and live their lives. There'll probably still be people who may try to achieve further ends, just like there always are in any community. Not everybody has the same finish line, but for the most part, the community will kind of fizzle out once gynocentric, because it's really an anti-gynocentric movement. And not everybody agrees it is a movement. Most people just agree it's just a bunch of guys making videos talking about their philosophy, and you can take it or leave it.
No, I mean, it's a very diverse movement, I acknowledge that. Some people seem like they're traditionalists, other people think they're just nihilistic.
My screaming goat is letting me know I have to go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, TFM, for joining me. It was a very enlightening conversation. And while we have our disagreements, I think we really pieced apart where exactly we disagree. So thank you again.
I don't think we're that different, because I'm not against patriarchal traditionalism. When I talk about being anti-traditionalist, I'm specifically talking about the gynocentric traditionalism, like what you see in these PragerU vids I do response videos for. Mm-hmm. So anyway,
we'll probably discuss it further. Thank you very much for joining me, and I know you have to go. Like I said, people who are watching, I've been tweeting out the link. I've been putting it in the discussion tab. If you're a MGTOW or interested in this discussion, please join, and we can continue the conversation.